Hi, folks. Once again, my name is Dave Farish, and I'm so happy to be with you today for our daily devotional. So, I have a pastor friend who tells the story of when the oldest member of his congregation came in and said, I need to talk to you about my funeral should you ever have to perform it. And he said, Okay, what's that? And she said, I trust you completely with the service, but I have one request, and it's really important. I want you, when you bury me, I want you to bury me with a spoon in my hand. And he said, Well, that's an interesting request. Can you tell me why? And she said, Well, you know how much I love the potluck. And every time I'm there, I enjoy the company, I enjoy the food. But one thing happens every single time I'm there, and that is as they're taking away the empty plates from the entree, someone always says to me, Now, you're going to want to hang on to the spoon because the good stuff is still yet to come. Well, our theme for this week is the Christ who shows us new beginnings. And I believe that God is constantly about the business, not only of showing us new beginnings, but even when we take the wrong path, almost like a recalculating GPS, finding the way back to a plan that God has for us that is richer and more meaningful than even our wildest imaginations can dream up. But I also think that it's really easy to miss or maybe not even be able to see the path that God is trying to show us. So I thought we might go to Luke chapter 9, and we'll be in verse 57. My Bible subheads this section as the would-be followers of Jesus. So let's see what we can learn from this passage. As they, the disciples, were going along the road, someone said to Jesus, I'll follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. To another he said, Follow me. But he said, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. But Jesus said to him, Let the dead bury their own dead, but as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God. Another said, I'll follow you, Lord, but let me first say farewell to those at my home. And Jesus said to him, No one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. Well, folks, for the very first time I read this text, and for a long time after, I was really troubled by this depiction of Jesus. It almost seemed like Jesus was insensitive about someone who'd lost their father, or that Jesus had this really difficult standard of what was acceptable discipleship, of look one way and don't look back. And that lasted for a long time until one day I finally realized I might have been reading this text all the wrong way. You see, I think God is not just telling us of the exacting standards that Jesus has for us, but I think Jesus is rather saying, I know exactly how challenging it is for you to be a disciple. And maybe if we name these things that stand in the way, maybe we can do something about them. So Jesus says first, I know how you like your creature comforts, but it's not going to be easy. And I think Jesus oftentimes told the disciples, made no promises that the road was going to be easy. I think he just promised them that it was going to be worth it. Second, Jesus says, I know how hard it is to start once you make the decision to start. That 1,000 things that are really legitimate can get in the way. And I think back to the times that either I or my friends have said, I really want to up the ante of how meaningful my discipleship is. And I'm going to do that as soon as school's over, as soon as my job settles down, or as soon as the kids get to school, or as soon as the kids get out of school, or as soon as I retire, or as soon as my health gets better. And sooner or later, all those as soon as stack up into a lifetime of missed opportunities. Finally, Jesus says it's so easy to be double-minded and be distracted by things that I call the urgencies of the moment. Those things that powerfully keep us from seeing the bigger thing that God might be trying to do. So, if that's the case, then how is it we can do a better job of seeing the pathway that God is laying out for us? Well, I know just the person to share with you some very helpful advice. And it's this person right here. As you might imagine, that's me almost 40 years ago as I was setting out on what would be a new beginning for me. It was my freshman year at the Air Force Academy, and that year was really devoted to this concept that the Air Force believed that in order to be an effective leader, in order to be a competent leader, you first had to be the consummate follower. And so from basic training, where that picture was taken, all the way through the academic year. And I think despite the fact that the freshman year technically ended on your last final of the spring semester, most of us sort of framed the freshman year with one last thing that would happen that summer after our freshman year. And that thing was survival school. And so part of that experience was a simulated POW camp where we were placed in there really to prepare us for many of the things that we learned from the Vietnam experience, where for the first time American POWs were really brutally tortured. And so the overwhelming goal of your time in the POW camp was to escape. If you were going to escape, then you had to do three things. First, you had to have a plan. Second, you had to constantly be amending that plan, taking in the information that you saw. But maybe most importantly, you had to be ever so vigilant, because the reality was that the opportunities to escape were few and far between. So much so that very few people ever actually escaped, both in training or in real life. And so the other piece that was helpful if you didn't escape was a way of escaping the persecution of that time, even while you were in the midst of it. And so one of the things we learned was that the people who were most successful at that were ones who could forgive themselves when they failed and finally reached their breaking point and said more than they should have said. And they were able to really quickly re-engage with not only their person and their character, but also with their purpose. And so when they were able to do that, they were able not only to set aside those failures of the past, but also the hardships of the present, because they leaned very, very hard into the possibility of a new beginning that would come once they were released and allowed to go home. And so, as I said, escapes were very few and far between there in training, but if you were successful, there were some good things waiting for you. One was a hot meal, the second was a shower, and the third was some well-needed rest. So it was certainly something worth trying to do. Well, complicating the chances of that for my particular group was that the group ahead of us set the record for escapes. And so consciously or unconsciously, I'm pretty sure that the people that were administering the program upped their ante a good bit. So much so that in the midst of what they would use to simulate torture, and those things were severe sleep deprivation, extreme physical and psychological duress, in the midst of that, I believe they got a little bit overzealous, and all of us managed to get to our collective breaking points at the same time, so much so that one of my classmates had a mild cardiac event. And so as a result, when that happened, they immediately decided that it was time to sacrifice a little bit of the training realism in the name of safety. And so in addition to caring for that person, they immediately put all of us to bed. Now, my bed was in a cell, and it was a piece of plywood that was really no more than a glorified shelf. But I was so exhausted that I immediately went to sleep. Well, at some point, I woke up with one of those urgencies of the moment. And that urgency was one I'm more familiar with as I grow older. It was I needed to go to the bathroom. And so I immediately got up, but at the same time, a second urgency of the moment came about too, and that was, I just need to do this quickly so I can get back and if I can just get a few more minutes sleep, that'll be so great. So I got up, went to my cell door, I opened it, walked outside, and I didn't know what time of day it was, and so I was a little surprised when it was a bright sunny day out. So then I had a third urgency of the moment, and that was, oh gosh, please don't be seen and caught. I don't want to trigger this back for everyone else. I just need to get out and get it done quickly. So I went out as fast as I could, I saw no one around. I thought maybe I'll be able to pull this off without getting caught. So I went to the bathroom, and then as quickly as I could, went back in, shut the door to my cell, and went back into my bed and just tried to get a few more minutes sleep. Well, it wasn't until a couple of days later that I realized that when I went to the door, my cell door was open. And when I walked outside, there wasn't a soul around. I could have been over the fence and gone. But because I was so distracted by those urgencies of the moment, I walked back into my cell, and the hand that assured my captivity was my own. I swore from that moment on that I would never, ever let that happen again if there was a way for me to prevent it. Folks, I know this time of distancing and quarantine has sometimes felt like we've been held captive. And I also know that some of you are facing some fairly significant duresses. Those may be employment insecurity, those may be financial insecurity, maybe some of you I know are battling some really significant health issues, and so there may be health insecurity. Maybe even the fact that we haven't been able to be in relationship with one another, haven't been able to go to church, maybe that gives us some insecurity too. And so one thing, whenever I'm in the midst of one of these challenging times, especially the more severely challenging times, my 18-year-old self comes back with two very important words. And those two words are pay attention. You see, I've figured out that in those moments, if you pay attention, that may be the way that you can see what God is doing that you might have easily missed. You may even see the fastest pathway out to something that is far richer than the challenges you're facing in the moment. But maybe even more importantly, for me at least, is that I tell myself, pay attention. Because even if I don't find a way out more quickly, that maybe I can learn the road out for the next person who might be facing a similar struggle. So that when they find themselves there, I can come to them and say, look, I know the way out and I've got a flashlight. Let's go find the way out that Jesus has laid for us. So sometimes, even in the middle of a challenge, it won't be in vain if I learn something that helps someone else. So my prayer for you is really a simple one, and that is, I pray for you in this time of challenges that God might be with you in an abundant and abiding way, but that also that you might keep your eyes tuned so that you don't shut the door that God might be opening, but rather keep your eyes open for the ways in which God is leading us on the path that goes to a new beginning that will be better than you could possibly imagine. Have a great week, and I can't wait to see your faces once again.